guys ready? You guys ready? Everybody can have a seat, please, so we can get started. All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the regularly scheduled mayor and council meeting to order. It is 6:30 p.m. on Monday, April 15th. If everybody could please stand for the pledge. I
of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
Mayor Johnson.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barrett. Here. Councilmember Saunders.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson.
Present.
Councilmember Price.
Present.
Councilmember Devlin.
Here.
Acting City Manager Loveland. Here. City Solicitor Rodunda.
Here.
Police Chief Henderson.
Here.
City Secretary Pincus is also present.
All right, thank you. All right, before we go into the action upon the previous meeting minutes, we have a couple of guests in attendance here this evening for a special presentation. So I'd like to call up Senator Poore and Representative Minor Brown, please.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Everybody enjoyed this beautiful weather today? Me too, until we got the hail coming out of Old Newcastle. Did anybody else have that? Yeah. Yeah, it was a little treacherous coming down, back down here, but. So tonight, we actually would like to take a moment to recognize someone from the town who just does a magnificent job in the work that she does. So I'm going to ask if Taffy can come join us up here. Are you a little surprised?
Wow, I didn't know I could do this.
How many of y'all know Taffy? Right? What an amazing applause, right? So it is our honor and our pleasure to actually recognize Taffy, and not just in the Senate, but also in the House of Representatives. Our majority leader, Mimi Brown, I didn't go through your whole full name, is that okay? Perfect. And myself have a lot to say. And so we are going to share this tribute with you. From the Senate, be it hereby known to all that the 152nd General Assembly joins me in commending Kathleen McMichael and in recognizing the countless volunteer hours that she contributes to the beautification of the town of Delaware City. Her commitment to keeping her community clean is unparalleled. Her genuine contributions are to be applauded. So we find it in the Senate that it is most befitting that we pay tribute to an extraordinary citizen of the first state. Yeah. So with gratitude, with gratitude and sincere congratulations, the Senate directs this tribute on Monday, April 15th, 2024. And for all of you that have not seen, she was just out the other day with a group of youngsters making sure that they were picking up to keep your town clean. And it takes a lot of time, a lot of dedication, and also some major safety precautions, on these highways to make sure that she can keep everything clean. So Taffy, thank you for everything that you do, and we certainly recognize all your hard work and are so thankful for all the hours that you have dedicated to this town.
it's an honor to present this tribute to you from the Delaware House of Representatives. Be it hereby known to all that the House of Representatives recognizes Kathleen McMichael, outstanding service to the community. Mrs. McMichael has been extremely active in her community. She has worked hard to beautify the neighborhood by maintaining the appearance of the area by keeping it litter-free. Mrs. McMichael's efforts have been recognized by the town of Delaware City and the Delaware City Police Department. We commend her for her outstanding contributions. The House of Representatives extends its sincere appreciation and directs this tribute to be issued on the 15th day of April, 2024. It is signed by your previous representative, Speaker Valerie Longhurst, and myself. Congratulations.
And your longtime fan, Speaker Longhurst, although she's not with us this evening, she wanted to make sure that you were well aware that not only did she sign, but she wanted to make sure that we let you know how much she appreciates everything that you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have another tribute. We have one more? From the governor's office. Do you have it here? I don't have it. So there's another tribute recognizing you, and it's from the governor and the lieutenant governor, and we don't have it with us, but it's so important that I wanted to make sure we mention that tonight as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm gonna give you
Thank you.
this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you to the council also for letting us do
I'll
this.
put it away for you, unless you want to hold it. Thanks, God.
All right, all for you.
Congratulations. Thank
All right, thank you, ladies, and congratulations again, Taffy. Now we're gonna move on to the action of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there any action from council?
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, motion is second on the previous minutes. Any further discussion? Not all those in favor? Opposed? All right, motion's carried. All right, now we're gonna go into certification of the election. Call up Mr. Dillapleen, Chairman of the Election Board, please.
Only 2 official candidates filed for the 3 available council positions in Delaware City municipal election this year. Therefore, in accordance with section 8-08 of the Delaware City Charter and Code Book, Chapter 2, Article 2, Elections, there will be no formal municipal election in Delaware City in 2024. No voting machines will be made available for voting or for write-in campaigns on the day of election. Official candidates for council members are Michael L. Jackson and John L. Roberts. They will be sworn into office at the April 15th, 2024 meeting of mayor and council. Also, Linda Price did not elect to run again, so we now have an open seat. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is there a motion to certify the election results?
So moved.
Second? Motion is second. Is there any further discussion? None, all those in favor? Opposed? All right, motion's carried. All right, before I swear in Michael and John, I would just like to take a minute to thank Betty and Linda for their service to the city. Sitting on this council, it's certainly been, a pleasure to serve with both of you, and understand, everybody needs to take a break now and then, but I certainly wish both of you well in your future endeavors, and I'm sure we'll still be seeing each other around. So thank you, ladies, very much. All right, so we'll go with Michael Jackson first. I'm gonna go up front here, Mike. Mike, if you want to, so I'm gonna do this here. All right, if you want to put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand, please. And repeat after me. I, Michael L. Jackson,
I, Michael L. Jackson,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
and the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
and I will uphold the Charter and ordinances of Delaware City,
and I will uphold the Charter and ordinances of Delaware City,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of council member
of the office of council member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations. All right, Mr. Roberts.
Sir,
Front and center.
as quick as I can, please.
Mike, if you want to actually move here, we'll put Jack
It's
on you.
easier for me here because I can
Okay.
speak loud and everybody can hear me.
Okay. Works for me.
You gotta speak loud.
Do you have any family or friends here that want to hold a Bible or anything? or-
Anybody wanna hold a Bible? Probably not.
Okay. All right, well, having said that, left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand, repeat after me. I, John L. Roberts,
I, John L. Roberts,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution
that I would support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
and the Constitution of the State of Delaware,
that I will uphold the Charter
that I will uphold the Charter
and ordinances of Delaware City,
and ordinances of Delaware City.
and that I will faithfully discharge
I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office of council member
the duties of the office of council member
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
All right, please support Chief Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. Council, city staff, and those in attendance, I'd like to present March's police report. If you refer to the Delaware City map, you'll see March activity was particularly slow, especially for highlighted crime view incidents. The green pinpoint at the top of the page was a simple noise complaint involving an animal. There have not been any known ongoing issues after the officer's response. The other noise complaint towards the bottom of the page was a loud radio coming from a parked vehicle. The music was turned down prior to the officer's arrival, and the occupants were counseled on the city's noise ordinances. The blue pinpoint in the lower left corner was a shed burglary where a green in color Sears push mower was taken. Entry was gained through a damaged shed door. If you look at the second page, it has the calls for service for March. There were 0 calls on Wednesday or Saturday, and early morning was pretty quiet. The first calls were 9 a.m., moving into 2300, 11 p.m., and the busiest hour of the day was 7 p.m. The total calls for service in March was only 40. That's down 46% from March of 23, which had 74. Year to date, there's 143 complaints. That's down 21, a little over 21% from last year's 182. Traffic arrests, there were 31 traffic arrests, 2 traffic warnings, 2 crime prevention checks, 11 crime reports, 19 field service reports, 2 accidents, both were property damage, 1 was a hit and run, and 0 criminal arrests. For significant events, Lieutenant Clemens attended a Fort Delaware Peapatch Island active violence tabletop exercise at Delaware State Police Troop 2 in early March. Deployment tactics were discussed with several first responding agencies. Lieutenant Clemens was able to emphasize how the Delaware City Police will be directly involved and more than likely first on scene. This forum is still under review, and a safety tour of the island sponsored by the fort will take place sometime this month. A DUI arrest was executed by Officer Williams after the subject attempted to flee from her as she activated her emergency equipment on Fifth Street. She was able to apprehend the subject, who was charged with driving under the influence, alcohol-related, as well as 6 other traffic charges. The department recently sold 6 of its used 6-hour P320 9mm handguns. This totaled nearly $1,600 in funds to return to the public safety budget as part of the package in purchasing the upgraded SIG P320s that were received last September. Police Memorial Day is Wednesday, May 1st. The department is planning a ceremony at 8:30 a.m. at the Presbyterian Church Cemetery for Constable George A. Davidson, whose life was taken on May 7, 1852, by a prisoner he was transporting to a Newcastle City jail. Constable Davidson will now be recognized and officially honored by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C., where his name will forever be engraved on the memorial wall. I wanted to follow up on the Police Advisory Committee that I mentioned in February's meeting. I've reached out to some of the interested parties and will be moving forward this month to finalize the committee and register with the Police Officer Standards and Training Commission. I didn't touch on the camera project and report, but on Friday, Delmarva was forwarded additional information on the cameras that they had requested. We're hoping that this is one step closer to approval by DP&L. Once we receive the go-ahead from DP&L, I foresee the project starting immediately. As the mayor has alluded to during this process, the vendor has all the equipment and is as anxious to get started as we are. I want to take a moment and thank Mr. Turley for going out of his way and documenting his ride along with the department. And for Terry Buchanan of the Weekly for publishing his detailed experience. And then finally, I have our second installment of the department's Community Service Award. If I could have Wendy Rogers make her way up here. As most of us are aware, Mrs. Rogers took on the daunting task of chairperson for our Delaware City Day event a couple years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, there wasn't a whole lot of time to prepare for the 2022 event. She not only pulled it off, but brought the event back strong after cancellations due to COVID. I attend most of the Delaware City Day meetings, and although I'm sure Mrs. Rogers would say it takes several to make the event happen, which is very true, it all crosses her desk, so to speak. So with this in mind, I wanted to present Mrs. Rogers with this Community Service Award and Challenge Point from the Delaware City Police Department. Delaware City Police Department Community Service Award, Wendy Rogers, in recognition for your dedicated time and leadership in acting as chairperson for the Delaware City Day celebration. This committed service and pride in the community is greatly appreciated and not overlooked. You are commended with this Community Service Award on this 15th day of April in the year 2024. And that concludes my report.
All right. Any questions for the chief? All right, thank you. Move on to the city manager's report.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council and residents of Delaware City. I just have a short report, an update on the community center HVAC replacement project. Amacor has submitted their permits to the city, and so they plan to start work on May 6th. We also received from the Cutting Edge a pothole priority list. They went around and looked at all the potholes in the city and put them in priority order. And they plan to begin making those repairs as soon as the weather improves. Other than that, I just noted that I attended the Fort DuPont board meeting on April 10th.
Any questions for the city manager? All right, thank you. City solicitor report.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council. very brief report. In the last month, the only activity involved some code interpretation issues and consulting on issues related to the COVID charter. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
one question for, not the city manager, but, for Michelle, and it may go to the city manager before, the next meeting, but on the Monroe Madison Street flood mitigation project, we got a note here that said Delaware City should receive an award letter within the next couple of months. I'd like to make sure that we can get an update on that at a future meeting to remind everybody of the scope of that particular project.
Yes. All right. Brittany, do you have anything for the finance report?
No, she submitted her report and said if anyone had any questions to email them to her.
All right, your report was sent out electronically. I do not believe new council members received that.
I believe I did.
I did.
Okay. All right, having said that, I will open the floor. If you guys are comfortable approving it, I'll entertain a motion to approve subject to audit.
Motion to approve subject to audit.
Second.
All right, motion is second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion's carried. Going to appointments, announcements, and communications. I do have one announcement this evening. Unfortunately, early this afternoon, I received an email from Paul Peretz, who unfortunately had to resign from the Board of Adjustments. He has some, from what I understand, some pretty serious health issues that he's faced with. Over the course of the next couple of weeks, it sounds like he's going to be relocating to Arizona with his family. So he didn't go into a lot of details, and I didn't ask, but certainly keep Paul in your thoughts and prayers. Having said that, we will entertain appointments for Board of Adjustment. If anybody's interested, please see me or send your resume or letter of interest to Town Hall, and we will consider it on next month's agenda. All right, communications or any organization that wants to give a report? Lyle, anything from the fire company?
Not this time, thank you, sir.
All right. Planning?
Planning had no business this month.
All right. HP City? Main Street?
The yard sale is on Saturday the 27th. You can post your items for sale starting on Craigslist, starting tomorrow. They make us do it within a 14-day window or a 10-day window. So that's available for you. And also, there is an app, and one of the favorite apps I understand from people who go to garage sales all the time is yardsales.net. If you post your items there, what that does is it allows all the garage sale people to look and see who's selling what. And if you put your pictures there, you can take advantage of those folks who are coming to town early to make those purchases. So with the yard sale, it's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday, April 27th. The rain date is Sunday, April 28th. And the Juneteenth celebration with Best Kept Soul is on June 19th. And we will have the Harriet Tubman display, landscape display at Petite Social from the 16th of June to the 21st of June. And you can look forward to that. And then National Night Out, this is the second annual for Delaware City, but it's the 41st annual National Night Out. It is the first Tuesday, always the first Tuesday in August, and that's August the 6th. And our headliner band will be What the Funk. We've been to the town before, and I've asked that it just be a 1970s and 80s funkadelic period while we celebrate a joyous celebration for our Juneteenth, for our National Night Out. That will be on August the 6th, from 6 to 9 downtown. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Tree Commission?
Well, the Tree Commission had a busy month. We received our Tree City USA certification for 2024. It was close. We managed to push it over the finish line. And we also sent out 2 RFPs this week, one for tree trimming and cutting for town, and another for the planting activities that will be taking place both this spring and in the fall. We're reaching out to folks who live over in Harbor Estates, a part of town which has been largely neglected by the tree commission and many other things. We kind of want to pull folks from Harbor Estates into the family a little bit closer, as it were. And we're asking for people who live in Harbor Estates who would like to have a tree planted in the blank space in front of their house, and there are many because most of the trees that were originally planted there have died and been removed over the years. So we're asking folks who would like to have a tree planted in front of their house at no cost to them, will be maintained by the city of Delaware City, to reach out to the tree commission. And we'll see what we can do to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary, you have anything to add for Juneteenth?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You'll see on the back that we have a snazzy new list of events for the Juneteenth celebration beginning on May 25th at the library. And thanks to Claire Wingard Turley for this nice flyer. I had occasion to call the national office of the Juneteenth commemoration this week, and I told her, the communications person, what we were doing, and she said, "Oh, yes, Delaware City, 30,000 people?" And I said, "No, 3,000. And she was floored. She said, "You are absolutely doing the kind of thing that will push this entire movement forward." So thank you, and thank all of you who have done so much to make this first Juneteenth here in Delaware City an excellent event. Thank you.
Delaware City Day, anything?
Just that our first committee meeting will be on May 9th at 6 o'clock in the third floor room at the library. I invite you all to come and join the committee and help out in any way you'd like to. We have lots of volunteer opportunities. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is Fort DuPont, is Tim Slave in here? Tim, anything, sir? No report. All right, thank you. Mike, would you like to say anything on the past event for what it says on the wall?
Oh, yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Mike Gracie, we, this past weekend, we had the Walk for Autism Delaware at Fort DuPont. We had two walks at 9 and 11. We had 1,100 individuals, families walking with us. We had Senator Chris Coons came and delivered us words to our crowd. Senator Poore was there as well for the third time. Speaker of the House Longhurst was there. Mr. Slavin, Chief Henderson, Officer Williams were there as well. Really terrific event. I believe overall we will probably raise about $100,000. We're going to be back next April.
All right, perfect, thank you. Congratulations. All right, let's see here. Hold on 1 second, John. Do we have anybody from the library? Refinery?
I know the library's doing the Art Day, celebration that will be on the 25th, and we are sponsoring.
All right, thank you. All right, John?
Okay, I'd like to report from the Delaware City Merchants Rep. The ice cream parlor is opening up this Saturday, and we got lots of new flavors for ice cream and fish. So it's all exciting to see that. Free concerts. Krabby Dicks will be offering free concerts every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, going right on through to the end of the year. Car shows are back. Cruise night will start on the last week of April. Okay. It's sponsored by the City of Delaware and the Merchant Borough Association, monitored by the Tree Association, make sure we don't kill any trees. It's from 2 p.m. to dusk. Also that day, we have a Philadelphia show band coming to Krabby Dicks at 1 o'clock, and they're called Doc Hollywood. Then that night, we have the Grammy Award Delaware's own Judy Sings the Blues, going to take us out through the night. So that's the last Saturday, which is yard sale day, which is the day that the residents created that event. Main Street promotes it, but it actually started all by the residents, and it's a great event. If it does rain, we're gonna do it Sunday. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Also, at 36B this week, we're opening up Delaware City's Airbnbs, Charmaine's Guest House, which is named after our mom, my sister's here. And that will be available for this weekend. So we'll be doing long and short brownies. Many of you, Gail and I have kind of left the day-to-day scenes of Delaware City. And I'd like to introduce you to our new manager, Debbie, who is my sister and my brother-in-law. They have taken over Krabby Dick's, so if you have any complaints or compliments, tell me. Thank you.
One last thing I forgot to mention, Arbor Day is coming, the end of April. The library will be having activities for young people and adults alike on the 25th. And then on Friday and Saturday, we'll have a table down at the post office where we'll be handing out free information, asking folks who have concerns about their own trees and shrubs in their own yard, who would like some help from the other people on the tree commission who actually know a lot. And so those will be happening this month as well.
Just Friday.
On Friday, the 22nd.
Is there any organizations I overlooked? Final call. All right, we're gonna move on to, there's no old business this evening, we're gonna move on to new business. I'm gonna go a little bit out of order, we have another guest with us this evening. We have Verdantis here that's gonna do a quick presentation on the seawall and the sea level rise, so I'll turn that over to you when you're ready. I just need the mic on.
I think I can talk loud. Can you hear me okay? Or?
There you go.
Yes. Okay, great. Oh. Thank you. All right, hi everybody. I'm Gina Tan with Verdantis. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. With me is Frank Young, also from Verdantis. In case you're not familiar with Verdantis, just wanted to tell you quickly that we're a national consulting firm of scientists and engineers. We have over 1,400 people with offices around the country, but we've been in the Mid-Atlantic area in Delaware for more than 45 years. You would have previously known us as Duffield Associates. So we've been a partner to Delaware City for decades, as early as the early 2000s, where we were involved in the design and the construction of the seawall. More recently, we've supported design and construction for the Washington Street Flood Mitigation Project, which is the stormwater pump station that's down by the river, and the Harbor Street storm sewer improvements, which connected Clinton Street to the pump station and allowed the city to remove the mobile diesel pump from Harbor Street. We've also been working with the city for a couple of years now to procure FEMA grant funding for Madison and Monroe Street flood mitigation in the northwest part of the city, which was mentioned a little while ago. And I do have a quick update on that I'll share at the end of this, and then happy to provide more information or more updates, moving forward. All right, so quickly again, I'm Gina Tan. I lead the sustainability practice at Verdantis. I have with me Frank Young, who's a structural engineer. Steve Lewandowski has also been involved in the project. Some of you may have seen him presenting here before. He's a senior project manager with Verdantis and has led a number of projects for Delaware City. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go through an intro of what our study was that we completed over the last 6 months or so. I'll talk about the results of our sea level rise and flood vulnerability analysis. Frank's going to talk about the seawall evaluation. We'll give some summary and recommendations, and then I'll talk briefly about the Madison Monroe Street project. Okay, so, as you're probably all aware, sea level rise, is potentially gonna have a significant impact on Delaware City. And so, one of the objectives of our study was to look at, both high tide and like storm flooding, in the city, how they might be impacted kind of at a high level. So, what are the projected high tide and flood elevations, that you might experience in the future with sea level rise? And then how will higher tides and floods impact structures in the city, egress, and drainage? And then we also did some evaluation on the seawall to get an understanding of what the structural condition of the seawall is, what capital improvements might be required for the seawall in coming years, and what are the sea level rise considerations for the seawall. Okay, so briefly I just wanted to share with you some of the data that we used to do our analysis. So DENREC has projections of sea level rise in the state through the year 2100. They have a low, an intermediate, and a high scenario, and that has to do with different scenarios in the factors that impact sea level rise, things like changes in greenhouse gas emissions, and other things that impact how much the sea levels will rise over this time period. So for purposes of this study, we used the intermediate projections that they have. So that shows 2.7 feet of sea level rise by the year 2100. I just want to make you aware that there are different projections. It's not an exact number. It's not an exact science. So the number may be lower or higher. We use publicly available topographic data or ground elevation data called LIDAR. We use FEMA's 100-year flood elevation information, and then we use some data that's available from NOAA for the local tide gauge that has some information about tidal elevations. And I do want to, before I get too far, I have a tidal data that I used in the study called mean higher high water. I just wanted to define what that was in case you haven't heard of that. So this is a number that we use to kind of set an elevation for the high tide, and it's calculated basically as the average. You have 2 high tides every day. It's the average of the higher of the high tides. So it's just an approximation we're using here as to what the regular high tide elevation would be. So the highest the water would typically get at a high tide on any day. So basically what we did here was we calculated, we have the current mean higher high water or high tide elevation, that's 2.9. We calculated, what would that elevation be in the future? So your high tide's gonna get higher, as we move through the century. And then on the right there, we have the 1% annual chance flood. That's another name for the 100-year flood. FEMA's current 100-year flood elevation in Delaware City, it differs depending on where you are. 8.5, I have as sort of the average number currently. And so as an approximation, we added sea level rise to that to give a rough approximation of how high that 100-year flood might be in the future. So you can see in 2050, it's up to 9.3, in 2100, 11.2. I'll point out that the top of the seawall elevation is about 9.2. So you can expect by 2050 that 100-year flood elevation is gonna be slightly higher than the top of the seawall. Okay, so one of the things we did with this analysis was just take a look at how many structures in town might be impacted by high tides or by 100-year flood in the future. So this is just a rough approximation of structures that would get wet. We don't have all the data to look at exactly how much damage or what's gonna happen to each of these structures, but based on the ground elevation at the structures, we totaled up which structures appeared, that they might possibly be getting wet, by high tide or by a 100-year flood. So you don't have any that showed up as flooding at high tide currently, but that'll increase up to 114 by 2100. So these are structures that would see some water, at least up to the structure, at high tide. So regularly at high tide without any protection. And then 100-year flood, you have about 400 structures that are currently impacted, and we expect that to increase as well. Another thing we looked at with sea levels that could be an issue for the city is egress in and out of the city. So essentially what we did was take some, look at some points along the main access routes in and out of town, and just roughly looked at what the road elevation is compared to what the high tide and the 100-year flood elevation would be. And so we see, I have a point labeled E1, which is sort of at the top of the screen there. You probably can't read that, but that's sort of the access point to the northwest of town. So we expect by 2080 that roadway would be impassable at high tide every day. And same for, I have points E8 and E9. Those are the ones that are sort of on the left of the screen, the west, sort of the west path in and out of town. Same, so by 2080, we expect that, you know, that at high tide, that road's gonna be impassable. Currently, you know, in a 100-year flood, they're all impassable at the sort of the peak 100-year flood elevation. And that, you know, water levels will just continue to get higher. So I'll just caveat this by saying we looked at the bounds that are shown on this map here, so, you know, there could be issues with those roadways further out that we didn't identify, but that's what we're showing here. Okay, and then another, you know, impact of sea level rise that we were looking at is the functioning of the drainage system. So we were looking at the drainage system in the vicinity of the seawall. You know, you've got inlets, you have pipes that discharge stormwater out of the city. We approximated the elevations of the components because there wasn't elevation available for the pipes and the inlets. So we kind of had to do an approximation there. And we find that some components are already lower than your high tide. And most will be lower than the high tide by 2050. And so basically what this means is you've got tide gates on the end of your structure. You know, your stormwater drains out kind of at low tide conditions. As the high tide goes up, there's like less time during the day for your drainage system to drain out, basically. So, you know, as the high tide continues to get higher, you're likely at some point to have some impacts where, you know, the drainage system as currently functioning is not going to keep up. I'll note too, by 2080, some of the components will be lower than mean sea level, so meaning they're underwater for more than half of the day, basically. Okay, so some of the recommendations we have, I mentioned a few times, some of the things we did here are sort of approximate, so getting some survey of your storm drain system and some select kind of topographic survey around the community would be helpful as you move forward and in the future perhaps think about you know, whether modifications are needed to the storm drain systems, seawall, etc. We recommend coordination with Delta on the roadway flooding. They have a priority list of roadways that experience flooding and are kind of keeping tabs on flooded roadways around the state. So just kind of coordinating to make sure they're aware of potential issues in Delaware City. We would recommend a drainage and pumping study at some point to get a handle on will the drainage systems continue to function with sea level rise. If you're able to get survey, then evaluating the floodwater access points, kind of the low spots beyond the seawall that might be letting floodwaters into the city. And then kind of longer term, considering height, seawall height improvements. So as I mentioned, the 100-year flood elevation is going to be going up. You know, there might be a need for the seawall to get higher as well. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Frank, who's going to talk about the seawall review.
Thanks, Gina. Again, my name is Frank Young with Verdantis. We did do a review of the existing seawall, which extends, starts on 3rd Street on what I'll call the westerly portion, and then comes down through the canal, the inner basin, and around out along the Delaware River, and then turns around back to the west again. The construction is varying depending on where you are. Generally, on the western portion, it's a cast-in-place concrete retaining wall, and it switches over to a steel sheet pile wall in the inner basin, does another little transition to cast-in-place, and then back to steel sheet pile as you go around out front on the riverfront. And it's been constructed in many phases, starting in the mid-70s. We just did a visual review. We weren't doing any testing of materials, thickness testing of the steel sheeting or anything like that. And we did it both from land side and the water side. So one of the things that you see when you start to walk along the wall is what we call oxidation jacking. That's just a fancy way of saying when things rust, the rust gets bigger and has a force and it moves things. So you can see in that left photo why it's jacked up that fence post, and that may be a little bit of freeze thaw too happening there. You see some more spalling or again oxidation jacking with the rail embeds, and that's a pretty common feature throughout where you have embeds. And it can also spread to your reinforcing steel in the concrete. The picture on the left is of the steel sheet pile wall in the inner basin. One thing to keep in mind as we go around to the outer basin is the horizontal element that you see there is called a wale. And on your inner basin, because it was a retrofit bulkhead, it's attached on the outside and the wall is secured through a series of soil anchors that extend back into the earth. And it's generally in pretty good shape. You're starting to see some, minor corrosion, but nothing that's of immediate concern at this point. On the inner basin, you can see in the middle photo some deterioration of the metal drain pipe. And then once you get to the outside, those sheets are clearly older, and you see significantly more deterioration and distress. It's hard to see in that most right-hand photo, but down near the edge, down near the water line, there are small holes in the sheets, and I think they were probably originally put there as drainage to relieve hydrostatic pressure behind the wall, but they've also tended to corrode over the years, and those holes have gotten bigger, and they've allowed material to escape, and you've seen over the years the material behind the wall has settled, and you've had to come back and fix that from time to time, and some of that's due to the material escaping through those holes. Again, there's a little better view of those drain holes, and you can see that they're not round anymore. They've grown and gotten expanded. Another item of concern, if you remember when we talked about the wall on the inner basin, you saw the outside wale. You don't see that here because we think it's on the inside. And if you look on the right-hand photo and you see the water weeping out of holes up higher than the drain holes, that's because what we think is there's an inside wale there, and a good number of those bolts that connect the wale to the sheets have deteriorated and allowed the passage of water and also material through there. So that's a little concerning because the wale is what is the primary means of holding the wall up. Now, that's not to say that all capacity is completely gone, but it raises an eyebrow and is cause for, I think further investigation. So, just to kind of summarize, what we would suggest is to repair your concrete spalling and the areas of steel embeds, the fence and rails where they've got distress in the concrete. It's fairly simple to do, and there are any number of contractors out there that can handle that. Also, obviously keep monitoring the condition of your steel sheet piling in your inner basin, and give some thought to possibly recoating at some point in the future. obviously fix the discharge pipe and the protective grading. And then I think probably the biggest takeaway is to keep an eye on your sheet condition and that whale connection on the eastern part of the wall out along the river. And that would mean excavating in a few select areas to understand exactly what's going on with the connection of that inside whale to the sheets, which is a very important connection. So we need to keep an eye on that.
Okay, so we just tried to summarize everything with sort of short-term, medium-term, and long-term needs. So, you know, short-term, we'd recommend the survey that I mentioned, some storm drain and topographic info, coordinating with DelDOT on roadway flooding, considering doing a drainage and pumping study, and repairing the concrete spalls and embedded items. Medium-term, 10 to 15 years, there may be a need to replace the eastern portion of the seawall along the Delaware River, which you can see that's sort of the big ticket item there. And then long-term, you know, consider that there might be a need to extend the seawall up higher, potentially 2.5 feet, so that you maintain the same level of protection that you have now. Okay, and then just real briefly, I wanted to touch on the Madison and Monroe Street FEMA grant. So, just to refresh your memory, we were asked to look into the flooding issues in that portion of the city following the October 29th, 2021 flooding, which you can see some pictures of there. The figure on the left there is probably too small for you to see, but the conceptual solution we came up with involved some height improvements to the levee that's located along Dragon Run, and a wetlands improvement project, and a structural flood wall around some of those structures on Solomon Place. Basically to improve conveyance and storage in that area there on refinery property, and also to keep some of the higher elevations that happen on Dragon Run from spilling into the city and flooding that area. So we submitted an application to FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which goes through DEMA, the Delaware Emergency Management Agency, to FEMA. That was submitted in January 2023. There have been extensive reviews of the application. I did ask DEMA for an update because it has been quite a long review time. And they said that the FEMA told them they expect the funds to be obligated. They told me by last week. I don't think it happened last week, but so it does seem promising that the grant will be awarded. Hopefully you can expect funds to be obligated this month. So basically what happens, FEMA obligates the funds, then at some point they'll send an award letter, and then that's kind of when you can get started. So the project would involve a first phase of full design and permitting for the improvements, and then the second phase would be construction. All right, that's everything we have.
All right, couple quick questions.
Sure.
This is probably difficult to answer since it's coming from the federal government, but would you anticipate like when phase 2 would be able to begin?
Yeah, so phase 1, we do have a schedule that we wrote up with the grant application. I don't have that here, but I would say, I think we had about a year for phase 1. So that would be engineering design and then permitting, which permitting will take a while. So this is wetlands. Obviously we're doing work in the wetlands there. Wetlands permitting could take 6+ months. So that first year would be taking care of the design and the permitting, and then you could move into construction.
Okay, so we're roughly a year out from construction.
Yeah, I would say a year plus a few months, because until you get that award letter from FEMA, they're saying that the funds are gonna be obligated, but we don't have that yet, and then it'll take a month or 2 to get the letter from them.
Okay. Second question is, the improvements that are being made, are they going to be sufficient to meet the sea level rise that you showed up there a while ago, where water's gonna be 2 feet over the bulkhead at the end of town. Are these improvements gonna be sufficient to meet that demand? I know it's a long ways down the road, but
Yeah, that's a good question. We definitely factored in sort of some extra, so, I guess the main way you're protecting against sea level rise there is raising that levee along Dragon Run. So I think we did, I'd have to look now to see what top elevation we specified, but I think there's some room there to, you know, to make sure it's high enough to address sea level rise. And then you also, on that side, then will have additional storage in that area, so if your wall's overtopped, you know, there should be some storage capacity before it gets up into the residential area.
okay, all right, thank you. And then does our staff have a copy of this PowerPoint?
They do not have the PowerPoint, I can send it. There is a report, there's a report that goes along with this, which they should have.
Could you send the PowerPoint to Brittany, please?
Sure.
Because we're getting ready to start our budget hearings, and the short-term projections that you had up there, certainly want to take a look at adding some of those into the budget for the capital projects.
Okay, and some of those items may be able to be grant funded too, if
Okay.
you want to talk about any of that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Dean?
I'll start with the Madison Street. You said there were extensive reviews. Did anything substantially change from the presentation that you all gave us 2 years ago in terms of the scope?
Yes, no, nothing substantially changed. The extensive reviews are partially just slowness at FEMA of, you know, it takes a while for them to do the reviews, but because of the wetlands impacts there, they have like a very extensive environmental review process. So that's mainly what it's been, is them deciding what their requirements will be for the for doing the construction in the wetlands. And so they're requiring what they call environmental assessment, which is sort of like a more higher level environmental review. So mainly the extensive reviews were around them deciding what the requirements were going to be for the work in the wetlands.
Okay. On the, I want to go back and look at the map that you showed. I don't know if you want to go back and show it, the egress analysis map. Oh, yep. That one. When I look at that map, and I've looked at it a lot of times from the report that you sent us, it shows that at the 1% annual flood hazard, there's a lot of areas behind the seawall that can get flooded from behind the seawall, not coming over the seawall. And I'm just curious if, you know, that to me says, you know, we could raise the seawall 2.5 feet and we're still gonna get flooding because it's all gonna come from another direction. Is that an accurate?
Well, so the mapping that we have up here is primarily, I'd have to check. I think this is FEMA's mapping. So FEMA, unless your seawall is like certified by FEMA, then they would still consider the area behind it floodplain, even if it's lower than the top of the wall elevation. So that's one thing. It may just be a mapping thing with FEMA's mapping. The other thing that was one of the recommendations we had is to get some more topographic information, to get some survey to investigate that. Is, you know, just visually when I was out looking at the drainage system, it looked to me like there was an area kind of to the, I guess, southern end of the seawall that was like lower, right? I think you might have some areas around that are a little bit lower than the seawall that are gonna let flood water in, you know, that are kind of lowering your level of protection a little bit. So I think it's worth, you know, looking into that and getting some more data to understand the different points where floodwater can kind of come into the residential areas.
Okay, and on the topographical study, would this be something that you would recommend to us specifically where to have the study done? Where to?
Yeah, we could provide sort of a scope for what would be surveyed. I mean, the drainage system is sort of first and foremost, and then I mentioned the LIDAR topographic data, which is like the free state, you know, the state has topo data. it's not super accurate around the edges of the water. That's kind of the challenge that we had.
Yeah, you mentioned in the report that they were gonna be updating some of that, you know, data, but it wasn't clear when they were gonna be updating some of that data.
Yeah, I can look into when the next, you know, they recollect LiDAR data every so often, so I can look into when, you know, when is the next time they'd be collecting it. You know, and again, it's sort of, there's just the areas around the water edges where that data isn't as accurate, and I think it would be helpful to get some additional survey.
And my other question is, when we have storms and the sea and the, you know, you have a higher high tide, we typically also have a lot of waves. And I'm curious if you took into consideration waves that can go over the seawall, even though the mean water level is not at the seawall height.
Yeah, so, you know, we're using FEMA's floodplain mapping, and some of the area along the river is mapped in what they call a V zone. That's like a velocity zone where there are waves. So their flood elevations there do take into account waves. As you get into some of the other zones, not so much. So, I mean, I certainly think, you know, if you get to the point where you're ready to consider raising the seawall, a more in-depth study of what the new height should be should take that into account.
Okay, I guess the question that I was trying to understand is, if we consider waves, does that reduce the time before we get to that top, you know, level? Because we're saying, you know, on some of those charts, it showed it might be 2100 before we get to them. But if you consider the waves in those areas, would you reach that point earlier?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the numbers that I used for, you know, the flood elevation, like I mentioned, there's sort of different elevations in different parts of the city, and some places are more prone to waves and some aren't. So I think you sort of need the next, a little bit more in-depth look at the flood elevation sort of at different points along the wall. I mean, I think, you know, waves are factored into FEMA's study, but I guess you gotta look at too. Are you just talking about a little bit of splash over, you know, are you talking about enough height bits? Yeah.
The storm that you referred to, it wasn't just a little bit of splashing. I mean, they were rolling over, you know, I mean, it was coming over in big waves, so.
Okay, I think, as far as I think there would need to be some more analysis to sort of optimize what level of protection you're going for, but yeah, I guess our approximation there of when your seawall is gonna hit the 100-year elevation was based on like an approximate flood elevation, so it varies sort of location-wise, if that makes sense.
I guess along with the seawall as well, you know, we do have those portable panels.
Mm-hmm.
And do we need to consider leakage around those? You know, because water, obviously those aren't sealed real tight. I'm not sure they would ever break, they're pretty thick, you know, but do we need to worry about, you know, improving the elevation in those low areas? Because I'm not sure what that elevation is, you know, at the bottom of those removable panels. I didn't go out to measure, but it's a foot, 2 feet, you know, so it would be more like 7 feet as opposed to 9.2 feet. And so is that something that we need to also be considering in the short term, long term, medium term?
Yeah, I mean, I know the panel design was done a while ago. I wasn't involved in that, but I mean, I think it was generally intended to be watertight. I don't know if they're still functioning that way. It's certainly something we could take a look at. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I think generally the volume of water that would come through the perimeter of those panels is very, very small in relation to what you're trying to keep out.
Okay.
So it's, yeah, they're not waterproof,
Right.
but they're water resistant, if you will.
Okay. Okay.
All right, any other questions from council?
I have a question. We have a seawall in Delaware City, but there's Fort DuPont. With all them new homes over there, do we need a seawall over there? I mean, to protect those residents? I mean, there's a marina right there. I mean, there's a boat slip right there. if it's gonna go over our wall, it's surely gotta go that way, right?
Yeah, so we didn't, because there's still sort of construction and changes going on at Fort DuPont, we did not specifically analyze impacts to structures over there. My understanding is that, it's designed with, that there'll be a levee and that the promenade area sort of along the channel, is high enough to provide some level of protection. But yeah, as sea levels rise, yes, they're gonna have impacts there as well.
And what we can do too is honestly, this subject could probably be a separate meeting on its own, so. What we'll do, if we get to the point where we budget for some of these short-term, things, repairs that you were talking about, and we get down to having the scope of work, we'll invite you guys back and have a special meeting just on this subject, all right?
Sure, yeah, that sounds great.
All right, fair enough?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. All right, let me take a look here. All right, we're gonna go back to the next agenda item, which is discussion and possible vote on private use of city property. Not sure who asked for this to be put on, but.
So I think that, the finance manager Graham had asked for this to be on, after a email she received from a resident, who wanted to utilize some city property for boat storage. Property that he maintains, that's runs adjacent with his actual property line, but it is city property. He submitted a letter, which all of you have, and photos, and I think Phil has reviewed it, and that's why it's on there.
So, within Delaware City, there's a lot of right-of-way that's along many of the streets that extends into people's properties, which often looks like that person's property, but it's really right-of-way, because street right-of-way can be 40 or 50 feet, but the road may only be 20 feet wide, so that means there's gonna be 10 feet, 15 feet of right-of-way that's on people's properties. A lot of people maintain that as part of their front or side yard. So, the issue hasn't been looked at too closely in terms of, well, how is this right-of-way being utilized? And it came to City Manager Baylor's attention that there was a property owner who had done some really nice landscaping on the city property. It was essentially some hardscaping with a retaining wall that looked pretty nice. I think most people thought that was pretty nice. And so the issue was never finalized before City Manager Baylor left. City Manager Hill, he also looked at it, but had not finalized the issue because it looked pretty nice. No one really complained about it, but it was in the city right away. So what happened, however, is we got a letter a couple of months ago from a resident saying, hey, I would like to pave some city right away and park my boat trailer there. And then said, well, because this person has this landscaping there, that's a precedent for that. So it sort of got us to the point now where the city needs to take a look at it and address it because it is city property, it's city right away. City council's gonna have to consider, and not vote tonight, certainly. This is basically, Finance Manager Graham brought this issue up because it came up when she was acting city manager and was looking for some direction from council on how to proceed. But council ultimately will have to discuss this issue and possibly have a public meeting on that because there is a lot of right of way. Some people have been using it without issue, but now we have an issue where someone is saying, there's a precedent set, I want to have a boat trailer there. And council has to decide if right of way can be used for some purpose other than just grass, what would be permitted. Because a lot of issues grew out of that issue. People start building things, they block sight lines at intersections. Some people are neat and they do something nice. But if you allow that and somebody does something that's objectionable on city property, then that's a different issue that you cannot create a precedent. So really, I believe this is part of the agenda to say it's on our radar screen now. It's been kicked down the road long enough, and we have to have some discussions amongst council to think about, okay, how should city property be used? And ultimately, city will have to consider a resolution as to how city property can be used. Before we do all that, there probably has to be some sort of survey done to see what's out there now. Because Delaware City's been around a long time, and the right-of-ways have been established for a long time, and they've been encroached upon by people, and so decisions will have to be made as to how to proceed. It's a sticky situation, but something the council's gonna have to consider, because we do need to let people know what is the city's position on that.
Well, my position is, I just wanna make sure whatever we do, we're treating everybody fair and equally and not doing it on a case-by-case basis. Whether that's reflected in the code or we issue a permit, you know, the other part of that too is if somebody comes to us and asks for space to park a boat on, you know, our code also says that boats or vehicles have to be on a hard surface. So that's gonna mean that that parcel's gonna need at least partially improved before they can park the boat. So that's another bridge we have to cross, I guess, when we get there, but
And
it's,
they wanted to do that, they wanted to actually.
they wanted to improve it.
According to the letter, they wanna put down pavement.
No, I understand this one, I'm just saying, in, you know, in perpetuity, as we do this for other residents, that's something that's gonna have to be considered. Is this something that could be addressed simply by issuing the requester a permit?
I think what you said is correct. I think that you have to take a broader look at the situation and have a rule that applies to the properties. Because if you start saying something's okay and something's not, that's when you start getting into issues. It's probably worthy of something much more than just this discussion we're having right now, because I know new members of council here,
Right.
and other existing members of council are only becoming acquainted with this issue more recently. It's probably something at some point that needs further discussion, so that the new council members at least can certainly digest what we're talking about, so they can weigh in on the discussion.
Can we put it on, Brittany, can we put it on the agenda for next month, and then if council has any ideas or suggestions, we can bring that forward next month also? All right, okay, perfect. All right, discussion on council responsibilities.
I asked to have this put on. When I joined council 3 years ago, we really didn't have any, I'll call, review of what we, as council members, are supposed to do. You know, there was no real formal anything. And so I thought it would be helpful, you know, for the newcomers to be able to go through some of these things. Just to familiarize everybody, so we're all kind of on the same page. I mean, not everybody has easy access to the code that's online, and so I thought it'd be good to just kind of review some of these things. So if that's okay, you know. The two things that make, the two parts of it that are relevant are Article 3 in the charter, which talks about what mayor and council, you know, our form of government, what they do. And I'll have the city solicitor kind of chime in here too, since some of this is legal things. But, you know, we do have a council manager form of government. As council people, you know, it is our responsibility to propose, you know, legislation and resolutions and things like that. Serve on committees, attend public hearings. So those are the kind of things that council people need to do. And, you know, from the mayor, he presides at all meetings, sees that laws and ordinance and things are faithfully executed. You know, the vice mayor kind of fills in when the mayor is absent with all of those responsibilities. It says, you know, that there are some certain things that we're not supposed to do. And, you know, that's in 3.08. And, you know, one of the things it says is we can't hold any other city office or employment while we're elected. And that if we do want to have, you know, be appointed to a city office or employment, we have to wait for 2 years after our term is completed. It says that we are, you know, we're not supposed to interfere with the city manager in terms of appointing people that work in City Hall. And, you know, except for asking questions about, you know, certain items and things, you know, we're not supposed to inundate, you know, the employees of in town with a lot of things need to go through the city manager. Since all of them report to the city manager, and the city manager is supposed to be responsible for doing all this stuff, you know, we should be going through the city manager, except if it's just kind of a simple inquiry. And definitely, we're not supposed to give orders to anybody. We can't say to, you know, the city secretary, you have to do this. You know, things like that have to go through the city manager. You know, we meet once a month. You know, our meetings are scheduled by majority vote of council at the last meeting of the calendar year. We can have special meetings. And, you know, we have a quorum, you know, we can conduct business. So those are the things in the chart. I don't know if the city solicitor would like to talk about any of those.
No, the only thing I want to comment on, particularly the new members of council, obviously, when ordinances come before council, all members of council have to state the reasoning for making decisions when you're on council. You can't rely on someone who voted before you to say for the reasons stated by X or Y. But for the most part, council members do need to be prepared to explain their position. And many times your position will be involved in a review of certain standards. And any time that there's a standard that's applicable, when you state your position, you'll have to review that standard. I'll review that with you when you get to the point of voting on something, but just for the thought process of your involvement on council and what you're required to do, you will be required to vote on matters and state your reasoning. If there's a standard, you'll be required to explain, based on that standard, this is what you think is applicable and whether or not that standard's been met. And we will be reviewing all that before you're put on the spot to vote. But we had one instance 2 years ago when we came down to the last person, and we knew that that vote was going to be a deciding vote, and that person had to state their reasoning for their decision. And I think the person felt a little bit on the spot that everyone knew that vote was going to decide the issue. And so that's why preparing for council meetings, you'll have an agenda, you'll know what's on that agenda in advance. Certainly reach out to the city manager to talk about issues, and then we'll help you in the process to make sure you're comfortable and understand what you actually have to do as you cast a vote. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as saying yes or no, because it's more involved than that.
Okay, the second one is Article 4 in Chapter 1, Administration in General, in the code itself. And, you know, this is the ethics for officials and employees. And an official employee is any person elected, appointed to, employed, retained by, in any public office or public body of the municipality, whether paid, unpaid, part-time, or full-time. So basically anybody who does anything for the city is responsible for maintaining the ethics. It goes into a whole lot of things, you know, in terms of fair treatment of people, you know, conflict of interest. One of the things with conflict of interest, and I would like the city solicitor to talk about this a little bit, says whenever the performance of official duties shall require any official or employee to deliberate and vote on any matter involving his financial or personal interest, he shall publicly disclose the nature and extent of such interest and disqualify himself from participating in the deliberations. And further on down there, it says, you know, that you should not even talk to anybody about what you think should happen. You shouldn't try to influence the votes of other people if you have a conflict of interest. And so I don't know if the city solicitor wants to talk about any of that before we...
I do want to mention that in any sort of government, particularly in a small town, there's a potential for conflicts of interest. The goal is to have council members vote on legislation. We don't have that many council members. We need to have a quorum to have a vote. If you believe you have a conflict of interest, I'm happy to help you review that and digest whether or not it's a conflict of interest. But the key words for conflict of interest are financial or personal interest. So if you have a financial or personal interest, that would be a conflict. But there are many ordinances that will come before you as a member of council that friends of yours, enemies of yours will have a difference of opinion. That doesn't create a conflict of interest. So you're on the council, the expectation is unless you have a personal or financial conflict, that you will be here to vote. It's important because we need to have a quorum to vote. I'm happy to review any sort of conflicts people may have. If you don't know if you have a conflict of interest, you might have one, you want to run that by me, I'm happy to review that. But the expectation is that members of council will vote, and the reason being is that we need to have a quorum. The mayor doesn't vote except in the case of a tie. So we need to have members present and voting.
Okay. I know that, you know, we did have some business that came, a year or two ago where, that pertained to, a business district. And, the council person who had a business said they felt they should recuse themselves. And I'm not sure that was necessary because, I mean, we have business that comes, you know, ordinance and things that affect the residential areas that, and, you know, most of us live in the residential areas, and so we don't have to recuse ourselves because of that. So I'm not sure, you know, how we differentiate that.
Well, it has to be a direct personal or financial interest because hopefully council's going to reflect generally a cross-section of the community. So hopefully there are business people on council. People just happen to live here, obviously, on council. But, I mean, the idea is that, you know, a business person can vote on a business issue as long as it's not directly related to them personally. And that could require some discussion. But clearly, the idea of council, hopefully, is to have a cross-section of the community with people from both areas. I mean, we just passed recently, or council passed, a residential zoning ordinance. Well, everyone here lives in a residential zoning district, probably. You might live in a commercial area, but that's not a conflict of interest just because you happen to live in the residential zoning district to vote on the residential zoning ordinance.
Okay, thank you. When it gets into, you know, other ethics type situations, basically it just talks about everybody trying to be civil with everybody else, recognizing that people do have differences of opinion, and it's okay to have a difference of opinion, and it's okay to be, to show emotion about your opinion, but you need to do it in a way that doesn't get to be degrading or, you know, start talking about people in a negative, degrading way. You know, you can have, it's just kind of like, you know, you can disagree, but you don't have to be disagreeable. You know, and so trying to maintain that area of civility is important in council meetings. And council is, you know, basically, you know, supposed to lead all of that. But it pertains to everybody, you know, who comes to the meetings. Let's see. If there are ethics violations or people feel there's a violation, we do have an ethics board. And so things can come to them, you know, and you can go to City Hall, but it can get, you know, sent to the ethics board if there, people do seem to have questions that need to be resolved.
And Dan, if you don't mind, can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
It's 8 o'clock and we really gotta move along.
Well, that was the end of it, Paul.
Okay, thank you. Now, what I was gonna suggest is we have several people that obviously wanna speak about the short-term rentals. We have to go in executive session. Jack's the newest member of council, so if he feels inclined or wanted to do an orientation, if you'd be willing to sit down with Jack, if he has any questions, make that offer to him, and you can do that, you know, at your leisure.
Like a one-on-one, sir?
Whatever convenient for you. You can reach out to Dan, you can reach out to any of us. If you feel that you have questions or you want to do an orientation, you know, certainly take Dan up on the offer, or any of us will be more than willing to help.
Right now, I'm being a sponge.
We're gonna have to do this again next month anyway, because we have a new council person, but, you know, any help you need, any of us will be more than happy to help you.
Thank you.
All right? All right, thank you, Dan. All right, the next item, I'm gonna ask for that to be reserved for executive sessions, resolution pertaining to the acting city manager pay. The discussion on possible vote on the vice mayor. I asked for that to be put on there because the charter basically says the first meeting after the election, we have to select a vice mayor. I wanted to defer to the city solicitor and also to council. Since we don't have a full council seated, I didn't know if we wanted to wait until next month because that may change the selection or the voting process for vice mayor, or if you guys feel comfortable enough moving forward tonight. So I'll put that on the floor for discussion.
I guess the question I have is, do we have another special election set yet? A date?
We have to set that date. We have to set that date, and that's part of new business also.
Okay, so we don't know if
It has to be
we
within
have a
30,
person by next month,
it has to be within 30 days.
right?
So you're suspecting May?
I'm sorry?
You're suspecting May for the election if you have enough applications?
It has to be within 30 days, yes. If we only have one person, one candidate, it'll cancel at the election. If we have multiple candidates, we'll have to go through the entire election process.
Well, I'd like to see us get another person on council.
Yes, I'd like to set a date, I'd like to set a date that's prior to the May mayor and council meeting, so we can be prepared to swear that person in at the next meeting.
Agreed.
So we wanna set the date for the special election now and hold off on selecting a vice mayor until next month? Is that what I'm hearing?
I'm fine with that.
I'm okay with that, as long as the
Okay.
solicitor says that that's okay.
All right.
I think that the council does have a quorum and could vote on this, but if council wanted to defer this to the next meeting, there'd have to be a motion made to do
Yeah.
that and a vote on that.
So let's identify a date for a special meeting, and then we'll formulate that into a motion, and also the vice mayor, part of it for next month. So if you guys wanna look at your calendars and see, well, for the special election, for the special election, that's what I'm saying. What date we wanna pick, it's usually the first Tuesday, is that correct?
It's the first Tuesday, but we do have posting requirements that we have to, so at least it would have to be more than 30 days. So you have 14 days, I believe, to set the date, but the date needs to be at least 30 days out, so we can, beyond that, so we can meet all the requirements for posting and notice and.
Okay. All right, so the May mayor and council meeting is May 20th, today's the 15th, so if we have it 15th, 16th, or 17th, that meets the 30-day requirement, and we would still be before the next meeting, correct?
30 days if you advertise it tomorrow, then 30 days from then. Yes.
I know the special election's been rumored throughout the community. My question is, has anybody even come forward to even want to be part of it?
I've had a couple of people interested, but didn't say that they were.
We had
actually-
no applicants then.
Well, we can't take any yet because there wasn't no vacancy
There's
until
no
tonight.
vacancy yet.
Okay.
The seat wasn't vacated until this evening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right, so if I understand this correctly, the 15th, 16th, or 17th of May, any of those dates will meet the 30-day requirement. And then we would have a regular mayor and council meeting on the 20th, correct?
I'm looking at
The 16th or 17th you could do if you advertise tomorrow.
All right, so the 16th is a Thursday, the 17th is a Friday, so whatever council wants to do with either of those dates. You know, I don't know about having an election on a Friday, I don't know.
Right, so I make the motion to hold a special election on the 16th of May.
Second.
All right, and you also, just for verification, you also want to amend that to select a vice mayor at the May mayor and council meeting.
And to select a vice mayor at the May council meeting.
Correct, okay.
I would just like to say that we just need, I'm okay with that, assuming that, you know, if, I see Brittany over there going through the code real carefully. I wanna make sure that she doesn't find something that, you know, means that it can't be that day, you know.
Well, if we're not doing it the 16th, Paul's right on that. We can't do it on the 17th, it's a Friday, we will
Right.
get absolutely 0 votes.
I just wanna make sure that, you know,
Brittany doesn't see something that says, you know, it has to be something different than the 16th.
So it's actually, it says the mayor shall by 4:30 PM at least 20 days before any general election give notice of such election.
Right, so
It's
that's,
20 days.
that's plenty of time.
That's fine.
Yeah. All right, so the motion is to hold the special election on May 16th from noon to 8 PM. And we also select a vice mayor at the May 20th regular mayor and council meeting. That's the motion. Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, motion and second. Any further discussion? Well, before we do that, yes.
You're probably gonna have to pick a cutoff date for applicants, because if there's more than one, then we have to comply with the state requirements of voting machine and training, right, Rick?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can do
I'm
that.
sorry, there's like a lot of dates that we have to meet for different things, so, could we revisit this, like, could we just look into all the dates before we select and then, cause
Well, no,
What
we
we
need
do
a
is look at
20-day.
Confirm state and city rules. Tomorrow, we put something on the website to announce
Right.
what's gonna take place, so that everyone will be aware of what's happening.
Right. Well, we-
Everyone certainly knows that there's gonna be a special election.
Right.
We've had several in the last couple of months, so there's another
So-
election coming up for this open seat, and
So we can really technically make the 20-day mark the cutoff period, correct?
That's what I was gonna say, if we make the 6th the cutoff date, we made our 20 days,
And then have
and
the
then
election.
10 days more for the election.
I think the question that Tim brought up is, does he have time to?
We have to go to, we have to get, arrange for a machine or two from the state. And, we have to go for our annual training for the officers and the electors. It's a year-to-year thing, it doesn't carry over. You have to do it each year for elections. So we have to we have to know that we need an election, and then we have to go to the state and say, we need a machine or two, and we need training for our officers and electors. And all that takes a little time.
I mean, I'll ask you, Tim, and I'll put you on the spot. If we had the election on the 16th, does that give you and your election committee time to do the things that need to be done?
If the cutoff registration is the 6th.
That gives us 10 days.
no, I don't think that's enough time for what we have to do. We're reading through this further, and it says that candidates have to apply 30 days, they have to submit their candidacy 30 days prior to the election. And then, but we only have to notice it 20 days before is the way that's worded, so technically it looks like we would need more than 30 days, because they have to submit 30 days prior. But like,
I think we should take a look at it, and we can announce on the website tomorrow the dates that we can do. I mean, the mayor can set the date for the election based on the timing, but the issue's gonna be, there's gotta be enough time for the candidates to announce they wanna be a candidate. They have to have enough time for everyone to be aware that they could actually run for office. So we've gotta put out there, again, I know we haven't had to have an actual election, but it looks like we're gonna need more time next month to actually have another person seated.
So Tim, your certifications run out April every year. It's on a rolling calendar. It's not for the whole year of 2024
We haven't been there. We haven't been there.
because you haven't had an election.
We went in 23, we're past our normal election, so we've run out.
Oh, boy. I don't know why we changed from appointing somebody. Okay, so what do we want to withdraw the motion?
I just wonder if our.
So, withdraw the motion?
Hey, Bill, on something like this would be, if we had a special election and, not that many candidates and a short notice, can we do it with paper ballots? Or we have to go to the state?
Well, we still have to follow, unfortunately, we need to follow this, and recent history is we only have enough candidates to fill the seats. And
Yeah,
so-
I don't want to do that. I want to go through the state because I don't want to get us in the position of doing paper ballots
Okay.
and questioning the legitimacy of it and all that. So I don't want to do that at all. All right, so is there a withdrawal for the second and withdrawal for the motion?
I withdraw the motion.
I withdraw the second.
Okay, so we're clear. Tomorrow we'll put on the website, what the potential or possible dates are.
Yes.
I'll
Okay.
give you the timelines and then we can.
And then based off of that, I can set the date, Okay, all right, perfect, all right, just wanna make sure I understood.
And one other thing, Rich should probably check with the state, see how short a notice we can get machine.
We're training.
And training.
You want you guys to be trained.
Yeah,
All right, so
short notice.
what you should do, Tim, obviously knowing this is coming one way or the other, you should probably just go ahead and get the training set up.
Usually Brittany does that.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on to the last item, is discussion on ordinance 230717-01 relating to short-term rentals in the R1 district. All right, I'm actually the one that asked to have this put on because I am getting almost daily phone calls about these short-term rentals. So I have asked a few of the people that this pertains to show up at the meeting tonight and address council in general, because that's where the questions need to be focused on as council and decide what action needs to be taken from there. So before I open the floor up, is there anybody from council who wants to discuss the short-term rentals?
Just to be clear, I voted against it. I don't believe the government has the right to tell anybody what they're doing in their own home. Convince the rest of council.
Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So, basically with the short-term rental ordinance, the Delaware City Code, like many codes, states what you can do in a zoning district. So the R1 district is the, essentially the least dense, single-family home type situation. Then you have R2 district, where you can do everything in the R1 and like townhomes, essentially. Then you have the R3 district, that is like apartment buildings, but you can have an R1 use in the R3. So basically what the Delaware City Code, like all codes do, is they say, in the R1, R2, R3 districts, you can do certain specific things. So when this ordinance passed, it wasn't passed to prohibit short-term rentals. It was actually passed to permit short-term rentals. So essentially what was happening throughout the country, not necessarily Delaware City, but throughout the country, there was a push to limit certain short-term rentals with the trade names that you hear all the time, that basically were short-term rentals where people were renting out their homes. And so across the country, there were a slew of ordinances that have passed, and they varied tremendously. Some said no short-term rentals in the residential districts, and some said you can do it under certain qualifications. So in Delaware City, the ordinance that was passed essentially put some parameters on having these sort of units rented, because it's basically a residential zone, and in any residential community anywhere in the country, if you find that there's a rental property next to you that serves more like a hotel, you might have an issue with that if you bought in a residential community. So that's sort of the basis upon how all this has happened, and it's not Delaware City alone, it's throughout the entire country. And there's lawsuits involving the companies that are promoting this type of use, because when Airbnb and other companies like that started, I mean, literally they were saying, rent your home like a commercial business in a residential district. And just like Delaware City's code, there's nothing in the R1, R2, R3 that says you could have a commercial use. So that's sort of where we're at. I noticed, but I did not have a chance to look at the ordinance the city of Wilmington just introduced an ordinance. I wanted to see what that looks like compared to what we have here. But nevertheless, certainly council passed the ordinance, council can change the ordinance if they want to do that too. But I wanted to at least provide some background as to how we got here.
The biggest complaint that I'm getting, is basically you have to be a resident and own a short-term rental.
That is in this ordinance, and that is in multiple other notices, ordinances, including, I believe, the city of Dover has that in their provision. We looked at a variety of them, but yes, that is a requirement that if you have a short-term rental, you have to be a resident of the city. As I indicated, certainly that could be reviewed. I mean, these ordinances on this subject matter vary, sometimes dramatically, depending on what conditions they want to place on, but council has certainly the prerogative to make any changes they feel are appropriate.
So what is just to throw it out there, just so I know what the process is to change an ordinance, and I don't know if we've ever done this, but what is the legal process if we wanted to repeal this ordinance until we went back to the drawing board and addressed some of the issues that are being brought forward? Does that have to go to 2 meetings? Or could it be done through a motion?
I think you'd have to, not looked at repealing, but I mean, I think council could certainly pass that ordinance to, amend it, certainly. I could certainly look at, if you want me to look at repeal, I could look at that, but basically, council could certainly pass an ordinance to red line out and remove or add anything to the existing ordinance.
So you're basically saying it can be voided?
Well, I think that, I mean,
No, Paul's looking
what up to
repeal.
to update or do anything with an ordinance requires 2 meetings. I didn't know if council could take any action to almost basically like put a moratorium or put a hold on it until we went back to the drawing board, but it sounds like anything that we do is gonna take 2 meetings, which is another 2 months to kind of get this sorted out.
I think, I would like to make a couple of comments, Paul, if I might. In the original ordinance that was proposed, did not have all of the detail that the one that we passed had in it. The committee that I was not formed, just said that it needed to be reviewed by the Board of Adjustments if you wanted to have a short-term rental. Now, again, the short-term rental, you can't hear me? Okay. Okay, it's on. Okay, is that better? Okay. The original ordinance just said, we just said it needed to go to the Board of Adjustments to be approved. It came to council, and then council said that wasn't enough. They said to go back to the planning commission and let the planning commission look at the short-term rentals specifically. And it was the planning commission that came up with all of these specific regulations. I see Toby back there shaking his head, but the planning commission did come up with these and voted on it. And it was approved by the planning commission. I was at that meeting, and Bill was at the meeting, we presented a lot of different options, because council had requested that. And so, that's what it came back, and that was what was, eventually passed. Now, again, when we were thinking about all this, there were conversations around whether it was a short-term rental for, just people vacationing, or was it an event-type space? That those were 2 different types of activities in a short-term rental. And in the residential area, the idea was if it's people renting for vacations, overnights, that should be allowed. If it was events where there's a lot of people, that was something that we said, shouldn't be allowed. And so that was the differentiation that kind of came up. The idea of whether it could be people who were residents, not residents, that was discussed in the planning commission meeting and discussed other places. And it was considered that, it was in the best interest of the city to restrict the use to people who were resided in the city, to try to maintain, people who were more likely to be, involved in the city and trying to maintain, the atmosphere around where the Airbnbs will be located. So that's just kind of a little history.
Understood.
But if we don't do the long-term rentals with all these rules, why are we being so hard on the short-term people? It's their property.
Well,
I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, if I had a house, you don't give me these rules, but then on the short term, you got all these rules, it seems like it's a prejudice to me.
Well, the problem that I have is the residency requirement. I mean, we're discouraging people from investing in the community. And I just don't, you know, it doesn't matter, honestly. It doesn't matter if it came from planning, it doesn't matter if it slipped through council, whatever. We've identified that we have an issue with these short-term rentals. Now what we have to do is figure out what we're gonna do to move forward and fix the problem. I'm of the mindset where, honestly, as mayor, I'm to the point where I'm ready to call a special meeting to get this done. I don't want it to linger through May and June's meetings, because I'm telling you, I'm getting calls daily on this thing, and I can't give any answers. So I'm to the point where I as mayor,
I'm prepared to ask. Battery went dead. I'm prepared to ask the solicitor.
I'm prepared to ask the solicitor to draft an ordinance to repeal the residency requirement, set a date for a special election. But the other thing that I'd like to see also, I brought this up last month, I would also like us to update the charter, that when any ordinances are brought forward, it has to have a sponsor and a co-sponsor, so we know who is introducing these ordinances, the reason why, and an explanation can be given. And move forward from there. That's my thoughts. I will open the floor for further discussion, but that's what I'm prepared to do.
Well, if we're looking for a sponsor for the repealing of the short-term resident, or short-term rental, I'll be the first sponsor.
And I'll be the second.
That will enable us to
Well, we can't do it tonight. We can't do it tonight. It has to be through, an ordinance has to be drafted, so whether we redact the residency requirement or we repeal it altogether, it has to go to 2 meetings. So we have to set a special meeting and have an ordinance drafted. So if you wanna set a date for a special meeting and have that on the agenda, I'll open
My opinion, sir, the sooner the better.
we have to do the posting requirement, so.
Yeah.
If you wanna set a date for a special meeting and put that on the agenda, it's perfectly fine with me.
14 days for the posting requirement?
7.
7 days.
7.
I will not be here next week,
Then the week after.
and the week after. Seriously, I won't be here
Well, I'll be here.
the following week.
I mean, you need a person's
So
name on it.
you won't be here the week of the 22nd?
I won't be here the week of the 29th.
We'll be here.
So next week's the 22nd, so you're
Okay, I
going.
will be here next week. Sorry, I looked at the calendar wrong.
So I would rather do it, since we only have 4 council members anyway, I'd like to have you here. So if we could set a date 7 days past the requirement on the week of the 27th. I'm sorry, the 22nd. So that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It could be anywhere from the 23rd on.
Everybody available for the 24th?
It sounds like we gotta fix your schedule.
The 24th of May?
No,
No, 24th of April.
Okay, sorry.
Let's go, let's get it over with.
Okay. So,
I'm available.
on the 24th of April, we will hold a special meeting to address the repealing of the ordinance.
Wait, I've heard different things, whether we're going to repeal the ordinance or just repeal the residency requirement. Paul, you said you just wanted to repeal the
Well,
residency.
that was just my thoughts. I mean, if council wants to repeal the whole thing, I mean, that's up to council. I think there are some valid points in there, so I don't know if we need to repeal the whole thing.
I think there are valid points, but if we're looking at a total rewrite, we repeal the entire thing, we go back to the drawing board. That way we're not dealing with this again. If we repeal the short-term rental part now, and we spend 3 weeks doing that, and a week later, we've discovered another weird idiosyncrasy in the ordinance, then we're doing this again. If we repeal it flat, we can start fresh and move forward.
If that's council's pleasure, I'm fine with that. We just need to,
Michael, you talking about repealing the whole ordinance or just the short-term
The
part?
whole ordinance.
I mean, we've talked about this over 2 years. I mean, I don't know what else we can learn, from that ordinance. Council had it in their presence for over 6 months before we actually voted on it. And so I'm not sure.
Well, let's do this. It sounds like what we need is clarification so we can let the city solicitor know how to draft this ordinance. It sounds like there's a motion on the floor. So I'll entertain a second, and then we can go into discussion and voting on the motion and have discussion from there. So there is a motion on the floor to set a special meeting date
I second it.
of April 24th with direction to the city solicitor to repeal ordinance 230717-01. Is there a second?
I second it.
All right, motion and second. Is there any further discussion? All
I
right,
would like to say that, I think that's overkill, since the only complaints we've gotten is on the short-term rental part. That's the only complaint that anybody's ever had on the whole ordinance is on the short-term rental part. And so I don't know why we would repeal the whole ordinance when the only thing people are complaining about is that one section on short-term rentals.
well, what I think Councilman Jackson's saying is we're gonna repeal it for now and go back to the drawing board and rewrite it. So, it corrects any deficiencies we had in there and also move forward with the people that had concerns. The problem is we only have 5 or 6 short-term rentals in the city to begin with, so.
Again, the question is, why are we repealing the whole ordinance? We can repeal a section of the ordinance.
And as I stated,
Okay.
if we do a repeal on one section, and 3 weeks after we finally get this done, and get that one section repealed, and 3 weeks after that, we end up going through the same situation for another thing that we didn't see. We didn't see this coming. We're not gonna see everything. But if we leave it standing as it is, and we do one repeal at a time, we'll be doing this till 2030. If we sit down and look at it, go through it, and actually look for the problems that we didn't see the first time, we can have a well-written standard ordinance for the residential district.
I guess the question I'll ask is, will people actually read it this time then?
Let's do this, That's hypothetical, we can't sit here and debate whether people wanna read it or not. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second on the floor. We're gonna move into the voting when we're gonna do a roll call vote, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Saunders.
No.
Councilmember Jackson.
Yes?
Councilmember Dudley.
Yes.
Councilmember Roberts.
Yes.
All right, motion's carried. All right, I believe that concludes all of the new business. Go into member of council comments. Councilman Jackson.
My comments are already on record.
All right, Councilman Saunders.
I think I've stated my opinion on this. I just find it frustrating that, council had, I'm not talking about the 2 new members, but council had, over 6 months to review that ordinance. And, to find out now that people are saying, oh geez, there might be something bad I don't like in it. It's disappointing. I can understand the issues with the short-term rental part. That came up at kind of the last minute, because that wasn't something that we had, as the committee that I worked on, that wasn't something that we came up with, initially. But the rest of it, and as the city solicitor said, technically, if by repealing it, short-term rentals are no longer allowed in the residential districts because we repealed it and they're not listed as an allowed use. So, we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there, that the only way that they can occur is that people are doing it and the city just ignores the rules.
All right, anything else? All right, Councilman Roberts.
Personally, I'm gonna be against just about anything that's gonna restrict investment, business, or anything in Delaware City. I think Delaware City's got an opportunity to continue to grow. And I think if we start taking that opportunity away from, no matter who it is, we're gonna restrict that.
Understood. Thank you. Councilman Dudley.
the people of Delaware City want us to change something, it's our job to change something. That's why I come here, to get stuff done. So if they don't like what we put in the past, then we want to change the new. That's just progress. I'm sorry about if somebody doesn't like it. Nothing personal here. This is just what people come and ask me to do, and that's what I want to do. And I want to go to bed and sleep good tonight. And no problem there.
And repealing doesn't mean it's permanent. Repealing just means it's temporary till we go back and fix any discrepancies or shortcomings with the code. So if the only concern is short-term rentals, it looks like it should be an easy fix to get this put back in, so. All right, citizens' comments. Any citizen wants to make a comment here? Yes, ma'am.
I'm happy to hear that you guys are talking about treating people fairly and giving opportunity for investors and businesses here. My husband and I, along with a friend of ours here, we invested in this town, and I was very proactive with the town here by asking questions before we purchased our business and our building. And it seems like it's a lot of chaos. You know, we haven't been felt welcomed. A lot of things have not been fair. And I'd like to add to that special meeting that maybe you revisit the requirements that are holding us back as investors about parking. Because not everybody's been held to the same requirement that we have now been told that we have to do. That makes no sense. So I would like that you guys would consider the parking requirements that we've been told that it doesn't exist. Every 60 square feet of our building, we were told we need 21 parking spots. Off-street parking. Tell me where I'm supposed to find those. We have been told that other businesses have offered to give us parking spaces, and that was not enough. If I would have known that before I spent the money on this building, where someone was residing illegally for years that everyone knew about, I would have never came here. So I'm happy here that you guys want to treat people fairly, because we don't feel like we've been treated fairly. So I would like to see that on your special meeting.
Yes, sir.
Thomas Stroke, 211 Baird Street. I also own 503B, or whatever it is, it's a crazy address, but I own 2 properties in town. I moved down here from the Philadelphia area. I fell in love with this city. I saw the future, all right? There's a little town north of Philadelphia, it's called New Hope. If any of you people been there, it's fantastic, okay? Everybody's happy, it's great. Tourists come from everywhere. I saw that here. I own 2 properties here. So, back to what we were talking about, parking trailers on city property, I have a problem with that. My property backs up to a piece of city property on Canal Street, and if you open up that can of worms, it's willy-nilly after that. And then, whatever you wanna do with your own property, I appreciate people investing in our town, so we all, you know, we all get the profit from this. We all win here. All right, it's gonna be a great city. If we stick together, we all get together and make this thing happen. That's it.
Yes, sir, Mike.
Just want to take this opportunity to thank the town council and the senator and the representative here tonight for my wife's presentation. She had no clue it was going to happen tonight. I'm not good at lying or telling stories, but she walked the one I told her tonight. So, but thank you.
All right, any other citizens' comments? Yes, Steve. Steve?
Okay, in addition to the parking areas, one of the other issues that has come up before the tree commission has been the issue where there are the alleyways that parallel the streets that go between the properties. Over the years, many people have incorporated the city property into their yard by installing fences or buildings. And one of the challenges we have run into is I get a call from a citizen who says, there's a huge tree in my backyard and it needs to come down, and it's a city tree because it's on city property. The challenge is we can't get to the tree because there are 5 fences between the city street that now cross that city property in the alleyway or the right of way. Those were, I think, originally designed as access to the back of properties. I think there were some piping installed in those ways, but they're narrow. They typically are 8 feet wide. You can't get a modern firefighting vehicle down them. And so one question that came up, and I was talking with Dave Baylor about this a couple of years ago, was do we need to somehow address how those properties relate? Do property owners share them? Do they remain city property, but the city takes responsibility for clearing out and enforcing the boundaries between the city property and the person's backyards? It's a complex issue, and there will be no inexpensive solutions for it, but it's actually something that's sort of just hanging out there, and the issue has been, like many we've tried to deal with.
What's the address, Steve? What street are you talking about?
That was over off of, I'm not gonna be able to remember the one I was looking at. Yeah, maybe like Frank, but there are multiple ones where, you know, these alleyways, run in back between the main streets, the east-west streets.
Well, there's an alleyway runs behind me, and on the other side of the street, the alley has disappeared because all of the yards closed in on it.
Right. So as a result, I've had to say to city owners, well, there's no way for us pragmatically to get to the tree that you're worried about to mitigate the branches that are falling out of the tree. And that's just, and they were understanding of the issue because they realized their neighbors have prevented the access. Anyway, as we address this issue of city space, it might be worthwhile thinking about the alleyway issue as well. At some point in the future, it might be well to come up with a resolution that equitably either gives that land to the property owners on each side, or that it's clearly placed or kept in the realm of city space, and then we also then take care of that space. Just a thought.
All right, any other citizens' comments? Yes, sir.
How you doing, Mayor, Council, and fellow residents? My name is Brian. I live down the road. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and this past November, I was elected to City Council in the city of Newcastle, which is a sister city of Delaware City. I'm here today to say I support you all, and I want to stand with you and work with you and move our cities together forward. So I encourage you all to come to our city, and I will encourage our residents to come to your city. I think many of our issues that we face are the same. For example, sea level rise. Perhaps something that you all can look at is maybe some wave breakers that will be out in the water to help break the waves as they come closer on the shore. But again, thank you, and I'm looking forward to the partnership.
Thank you, sir. Citizens' comments, Dale.
Yes, Honor, 30 Clinton Street. So, a few meetings ago, I requested that the dog waste receptacles be stocked with the bags. And on that note, I have a message from my best friend, Miss Cooter. Miss Cooter is my 8-year-old German Shepherd, and she wants to thank you all. Because they have been stocked, and hopefully people are using them, because it doesn't seem less waste in the park. But speaking of the park, as I walk Cooter around the park there, the improvements look great. I love the new flagpoles, the brick sidewalks, but we gotta think about maintenance. For examples, when I was with HPC a few years ago, we spent a lot of time and energy getting grant money and getting the interpretive signs along the seawall, all positioned, what it should be. If you look at them now, you can't read them. They're peeling off, it looks like an abandoned city if you look at those interpretive signs. The street banners, which when I was on Main Street, we had the first round go up. Second round is looking good, but they're starting to see a little wear and tear. I don't know if there's plans with the city or Main Street to be able to fund that to get more street signs put up. I'm hoping more flowers will be planted in the park. It's a beautiful park, it just needs to be maintained and taken care of. And speaking of Main Street, I'm glad I'm going to get back involved with Main Street. I spoke to Tim about that. I want everyone to get involved. It's a great organization when it has proper leadership and run well. So I want everyone to get involved, and if you need to find out what the meeting is, I'm sure President Tompkins will definitely pass that order on to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dale. Yes.
Now Stewart, 111 Clinton Street. I was just wondering if there's any action plan for the burned townhouse at 107 Clinton Street. It's not only an eyesore, it's a safety issue. My ring camera shows kids going back in the back of that.
Where do we stand on that? You know, is that still in insurance? litigation?
So, yeah, the city has been looking into options for what we can do, trying to contact the owners, issuing, citations where we can. We're having a hard time getting information on where the owner stands with the insurance and things like that. I know that we had talked to Bill's office at one point, I'm not sure, I wasn't part of that at the time, but I'm pretty sure he met with one of the previous city managers about it.
Are we able to, Bill, is there anything in our code that would allow the city to condemn that property?
Someone else worked on that issue, I'm happy to look at that and report back to.
Okay. All right, we'll look into, see if we have the ability to condemn that property or what legal action we can take. All right? Citizens' comments. Lynn?
Lynn Wilson, 118 Clinton Street, chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission, and I'd like to address Dale on the interpretive signs. 2 months ago, I applied for a loan, or not a loan, but a matching grant to have all those signs replaced. We've got the quotes in, and the grant paperwork has been filed, and I've heard kind of through the grapevine, that we are like 99% sure that we have been accepted and we will have that grant. And the drawings are already in place. We've already talked to Cutting Edge about doing an installation, so they will be changed out. We kind of kept it under wraps, because, the minute you put it out there in the world, something screws it up. But, yeah, they're gonna be really nice. Looks like they were hit by acid. Yes, somebody decided to decorate for themselves.
All right, thank you, Lynn. Yes, ma'am.
We're the owners of 906 Fifth Street, and I think that is the big elephant in the room. I think that's where a lot of this controversy is coming around. The property in the past has been deemed, we've heard a lot of stories about a guy named Mike that used to own this house. Apparently some big parties happened at this house. That is not the same house, we're not the same owners. We invested a lot of money into our property. My husband and myself are very involved in that property. And the type of guests we have, they have to require IDs, we're super hosts. There's a lot of things that go involved into managing our property. We've heard countless stories about Mike. I don't know Mike, I've never met him, but apparently 2 owners ago, he left a lasting impression on Delaware City. We are not that. We've heard a lot of stories about people who grew up in the area, used it as a youth center and different things like that. That property, we welcome everybody to come into our property. It is now a luxury property. We invested a lot of money into that property, and we've served the community. I'm a registered nurse, I'm a mom of 4. I'm the owner of the largest track club in the state. I would never bring that type of unwanted business to Delaware City. We want to support Delaware City. We've supported Sunday's Cafe next door to us. They cater some of the events at the house. We sent our guests to Krabby Dick's for dinner. We support the pizza place next door. So these are the type of things and these are the type of initiatives that we want to have with the community and the relationships. We're tired of the negative tone that has been thrown to us about Mike and all these different people, and just because they see cars on our driveway, they automatically assume that Mike is back in town and here we go with round 2. We've invested a sizable amount of money in our property. I would never let anybody come in there and trash it. I would never allow that in the town. We work with Newcastle County. We work on all types of initiatives, and I just want the support of the community. Like she said, we don't feel support. Nobody's ever come over and said, hey Sue, hey Tony, welcome to the area. What do you have going on here? We've invited people into the home and they cannot believe it. If you look online and look at our home, we've done major improvements, not the home that everybody has seen in the past, and we continue to do improvements. We welcome the community support. We welcome an open conversation. If there's a violation, according to this report that they just went over, Delaware City Police with noise and noise violations, we're not on it. We're not on this report. We never have been. And my neighbor Angelo, to the right and left of me, I tell them all the time, if you have a problem, if somebody gives you a report, call me. We'll come right over there and tell any guest, hey, you gotta quiet down. This is a neighborhood, we have residents around us. That's the type of community that we want. That's the open dialogue that we want. So I just wanted to address that instead of making these ordinances, and I feel like after we get over one hurdle, then something else gets changed into it and we're back in here. Being a resident of this area, I live 7 minutes away. I'm right outside of Delaware City. It makes no sense to make me be a resident to operate a business that I live 7 minutes away from. And passing it, feel like if once this is turned down, that what is gonna come next? Are you gonna do another ordinance or another amendment to the ordinance to restrict it? All of the conversation has been around this property, and we just wanna have an open dialogue and have a great relationship with the community to support us. Thank you.
All right, citizens' comments, John.
Thank you, John Buckley, 32 Glenwood. The seawall panels, any clue when they'll be taken out?
The seawall panels?
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones that are missing.
No, they're seawall panels that are in, you can't see.
You mean the panels are in, they need to be taken out? Well, we can pass that on to cutting edge.
Okay. Parking. Parking's not an issue in Delaware City. It seems like council seems to want to make it an issue. We now have an additional parking lot. I'm a small businessman. I have many businesses, many rental businesses that depend on customers. If parking was an issue, I'd be screaming, okay? It creates our, the businesses down here. If we have to have parking spots for our businesses, every time a business leaves, that according to the ordinances, we have to have parking spots. Those buildings don't have parking. So the ordinance is written, and it's impossible for the tenant to have the parking. It's a stupid ordinance. A lot of them are. But that especially. And when I hear Mia and Evan come here, they were so proud. They bought a very unique property, a property that's probably really hard to sell. And they paid $3 million, and they came down here with a vision, and they were being discriminated against. Other businesses have opened, and there's been no parking requirements. It seems like, and Downline was discriminated against. When we had Lewinsky's, we heard council yelling about parking all the time. Now there's a venue there with multiple businesses, and nobody ever says anything about that. So it seems like people are picked out. And, it's like pick and choose. And that's just not fair. What we do have a problem with, is we invite people down here. People come to Delaware City all different ways. They come by boat, they come by car, they walk. Some people are born here and never leave. But we have no public accommodations for them to go to the pot. Town Hall just did a several $100,000 renovation a couple years ago, and there's no public access for people to go potty. What do we have? We have 2 porta potty out by the
Fort.
yeah, the seawall. That's not a good impression of Delaware City. We have the board that has bathrooms. Why don't we network with them? I'll even volunteer to have my sister Daddy clean it. Let's not worry so much about parking. If parking was really an issue, Dale and I have meters so we can stop the problem. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
And last but not least, I forgot. One more day. We have Drag Queen Bingo every third Thursday at Krabby Patties. And Wally Poppy is not there. Thank you.
All right, thanks, John. Any other citizens' comments? Yes.
I'll be brief because I'm starving. And I'm Lisa Morris. I'm a real estate attorney. I just came to support my friend of 30 years who owns the property across the street that's being utilized as the Elephant in the Room Airbnb. I just want to point out that just picking on, I do have ties, long-standing ties to Delaware City. I'm a parishioner in St. Paul's. My son was baptized and made his first Holy Communion here. So we're very intrinsically tied with the city and my family. I just want to point out that while I heard some verbal rationale raised by several people about why this might be an issue, I just want to point out that what's written into the code or written into the proposed rule, it doesn't cite that it may be something that might be undesirable to someone, which is subjective. It also doesn't cite that this is a national trend. It really specifically says it's for public safety. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody differentiates what's written into it and what, may be the sentiments shared today. And all of the items that were discussed in that rationale are really addressed already in other sections of the code, and can be addressed if people want to add to the code as far as noise violations, as far as, trash, parking, which just seems to be another hot button issue. But I just want to, kind of echo the sentiment that some people shared today about property rights. Obviously, it's an important thing to me. And I do think it's a slippery slope, not to be dramatic, but, if you want to live in a community that has very strict rules, that's not really what a city's for. That's really a deed restricted community where someone can say, you can't hang, I can't hang black curtains on my house. I knew that when I moved in. But that's not necessarily an appropriate role for the city to take. And again, I think permitting is important. And I do want to just, for as a last point, say that it might be good to connect with City of Newcastle or City of Middletown or comparable sized cities, rather than looking to Wilmington or Dover, just because their needs and everything's going to be different there. So I think, especially with Brian from City of Newcastle, with the historic nature, limited parking, waterfront, those are all very similar attributes that I think you guys could definitely, as an outsider looking in, take advantage of some open lines of communication and see maybe how they've handled some of these issues.
All right, thank you. All right, any other citizens' comments?
Call the question. We lost the Paul Correct. Do we still have a quorum with Board of Adjustments?
We do. There'll still be a quorum, but we definitely need to get that replaced for sure. All right, final call, citizens' comments? All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? We will be in executive session. You're more than welcome to hang out until we come out, but I don't know how long it'll be. So, thanks.
I'm putting it there for myself.
Just remember my name.